Hey everybody, welcome to this session. I'm Ethan Lieber, the CEO of Latchel, here along with our guest today, Kelly, a full-time property manager with T-Square Management and the incoming president of NARPM, the National Association of Residential Property Managers. Welcome to the show, Kelly.
Hi, Ethan. Thanks for having me. I'm really delighted to be here today.
It is an absolute pleasure to have you. I'm so excited that you were able to carve out the time in your schedule, which I'm sure is incredibly busy with you prepping to be the incoming president. Maybe we can start, for anyone that doesn't know much about NARPM, with quick elevator pitch, kind of high level on what is NARPM.
So as you described it, it's a very long word or long phrase, National Association of Residential Property Managers. We like to call ourselves NARPM just because it's easier. When I tell people, I've been responded to with, it sounds like it's a disease or something. So yeah, we just call ourselves NARPM, and we are an organization that supports the learning, the growing, and the networking among single-family residential property managers. And generally, overall, we serve all kinds of group or people that manage property, the short-term and the long-term and HOA, and those people are all managing those different types of properties. But primarily, we're focusing on the residential long-term rental. And we provide, the biggest thing that we provide is the networking opportunities and knowing that you're not the only one in your boat, right? There's some unique experiences when you're managing single family homes. So we are an organization that supports those folks that are experiencing those things.
Yeah, and for my exposure to NARPM, and I've had the good fortune of being able to find NARPM early on in Latchel's history. So we've kind of been able to grow and develop as a company alongside our own affiliate membership or vendor kind of membership with NARPM. But you guys do everything from running coursework to providing that network to offering chapter specific luncheons, chapter conferences, national conferences.
Right. And we have a lot of, one of our biggest things, people talk about what they get out of NARPM, and every time you ask somebody, usually the first thing they say is the friendships I've developed over the years within the organization. And there's something about finding those that do the same thing that you do, and the troubles and the struggles. I remember walking into my very first meeting here in the Seattle area in the King County chapter, and talking to people and saying, oh my gosh, you are experiencing that too? You mean I'm not alone? And as a professional property manager, you run across, everything from soup to nuts with the human condition and with your owners and tenants and vendors, all of that stuff. And it's just really nice to be able to have a sounding board. So that networking is great, but I wouldn't have had that without the chapter meetings. We have a really big population of what we call at-large members who don't have a chapter nearby. And some people will go 2 and 3 hours just to get to their monthly chapter meeting because it's so valuable to them. And that education and network.
Yeah, I mean, I have the greatest pleasure when I get to work with management companies coming out of NARPM. And I think part of that reason is, a lot of folks going into property management are trying to figure everything out for themselves. And it's like, why do that when you have an organization that has already figured it all out with how many members are in NARPM now?
Well, right now we've got just over 6,000. So we've grown quite a bit. We have a goal to our strategic plan 2 years ago was to get to 7,500 by the end of 2020. So we've got a lot of great things in place to increase member services and the benefits that are available to the members to hopefully we're on track kind of to get that number. And we've kind of elevated our game quite a bit over the last year and a half to increase our membership and get to our vision of, like I said, the recognized leader in the residential property management industry. So 6,000 members is pretty big, yeah. At least it is for us. When I first went to my first convention in 2005, there were 300 people at the convention. And now we've got close to 1,000 at every convention and all different kinds of other opportunities for people to get together. So,
well, in the conventions, beyond like the networking opportunities and chance to learn, are also just a ton of fun. So if you're a manager, property
Yeah.
manager, and you're looking to take a vacation, it
Well,
could be like a twofold. Have your
yeah.
vacation and your learning opportunity.
Well, it's funny you say that because I'll be on a plane or, wherever, and I'll tell somebody I just got back. I just got back yesterday from San Antonio for leadership training. We bring all the chapter leaders into one location for a day and a half, and we go over what's the best practices of running your chapter and how can you make it better and all that. And someone asked me, were you out of town on business or pleasure? And I said, well, it's really, really fun, but I was sent there by business.
But it's actually business. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. So I want to dig in a lot to NARPM, the vision, and we keep saying NARPM, but for anyone listening that's unfamiliar, where NARPM comes from are the letters NARPM.
Correct. Yes.
That might be super basics, but I just figured, like, in case anyone's listening and hasn't heard of NARPM, it's NARPM.
Right, and it's similar. The organization supports folks that are doing that residential property management, but our association isn't. I don't think we are like NAA or NAR, but if you're trying to think of some similarities or some frame of reference, that's kind of what we are. I've heard our organization from people that are in those two other groups that when they come to a NARPM meeting, it's like coming to a family reunion with people you really like. And it's not that the others aren't that way, it's just different.
Yeah. So I know you're the incoming president now for 2020 for NARPM, and I imagine you only get a designation like president for an organization like NARPM if you have a lot of experience in management. So I'd like to sidetrack just for a moment, and if you could tell us a little bit about your background and how you even got into property management and your current company, that would be great.
Sure. So most of what I find in talking to a lot of property managers, and it's kind of shifting a little bit, but a lot of people that get into this industry didn't wake up one day and say, I think I'm going to go be a residential property manager and manage other people's homes. It's more they generally have invested in their own rental properties and kind of stumbled into it one way or another. And I'm no different than the norm in that regard. So my husband and I started buying and selling HUD foreclosures back in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, and found that was a great way to kind of put a little savings aside and so on. And so when we couldn't sell them right away, and these were small units, they, really, we would go in and we would generally look at a condo and replace the carpet and the paint and maybe some appliances or whatever, and something I could do while I was raising our kids and he was working a corporate job. And so they wouldn't sell right away for maybe the amount of money we were looking for. So we just kept them as rentals. And I hate to admit it, but for myself, I'm a terrible landlord because I'm just this bleeding heart. Oh, if their rent's late, that's okay. But when we manage
too much of a softie.
I am too much of a softie. But when I manage for other people, you can't say that. You can't say to your client, Mr. Client, I'm sorry, I didn't collect rent. They were just so nice, and I didn't want to make them have to pay the rent. So we do have protocols in place now that we make sure that if they're not paying rent, we do the right thing and follow that up and whatnot. But so we probably owned about maybe, 6 or 8 of our own rentals here in the Seattle area. For a few years. And like I said, I was home raising the kids and Tom was working his corporate job. And a neighbor came over one day and said, hey, I'm moving over to Central Washington and I've got 5 rentals here in this area. Can you manage them for me? And Tom is a designated broker and I was a regular broker. So we had our own real estate company, if you will, out of the house. And so in the state of Washington, you have to be licensed to manage be a third party manager. So we said, sure, we can do that. So we set up some fee structures and so on, and we started managing. And then another friends of ours moved to Connecticut, so we started managing their house. And this just kind of, over the years, the first few years, just kind of grew. And we were managing probably about 25 doors, units or doors or homes or whatever. And then we just thought there was a lead generating company at the time. It was APM, and they were actually out of Central Washington. And so we just put our name on this APM site. And so I started meeting clients at their homes and doing all that sales stuff. And the first convention, like I said, that we went, I found out about NARPM in 2005 after trying to reinvent the wheel. And went to that convention. We probably had about 50 doors at that time.
Mhm.
And that's when I really found, I call it finding my tribe. I just connected with people from the Northwest area that I'm still very good friends with. As a matter of fact, Vicki Gaskill and I are close, and she installed me as the president back in October there in Arizona at our convention. And so we just kind of grew from there, and now we manage about 450 residential doors. And I say doors because it might be one property, but it has 20 doors, 20 units in it or something. So 450. And then we've developed our HOA management department, or community association management, and we manage about 85 community associations. So we've got a team of about 18 people for both divisions, and kind of built from there. And I have to tell you, yeah, there's not a lot of education out there for property managers, for just strictly property managers. There's a lot of education for real estate agents and people that are selling real estate. NARPM is the only organization that solely provides education to residential property managers. And so that was one of the things that kind of solidified my membership. And I have to say, the network, and I've met some great friends. And at first it was in the King County area. And then I go travel and I speak and I meet just some really fabulous people, and they know what the troubles I'm going through and all that. So
that's awesome. And
yeah.
It sounds like in a very short time, you developed a pretty large, robust management company.
Well, all of our growth has been organic. We have not acquired any other companies. And so it has been slow. It's been very intentional and methodical. And we like to say we are the best value for the services that we provide in the area. So we're not going to be the least expensive, and we're not the most expensive, but we are the best value. And the service we provide is, I think, one of the best in the industry in our area. There's some great property managers in our area, and they're tough competition, but it's all very friendly competition, and there's enough to go around. So we all are good colleagues, good friends, and good colleagues, and we exchange ideas and information from time to time. So
maybe we can segue by digging into that. What do you, sure. And actually, before we do that, I see David asked the question of where he can find a local chapter. So if anyone's listening, sure. and they have the burning curiosity right now to go look up where their local chapter is, where should we direct them?
Okay, so send them to, if you go to NARPM, NARPM.org, and there should be a link on the homepage there that says find a chapter or become a member, something like that. And there's also, if you hover your cursor at the top, there's a little drop-down menu for a search bar. And you can put in there, find a chapter, and it should show up. Yeah.
Cool. So anyone that wants to check that out right now, you can now go check out narpm.org and go find your local chapter. So you mentioned that, you consider yourself one of you might not be the most expensive, but you'd consider yourself best value.
Yes.
And one of the best companies in your area. Maybe we can dig into what you think is important to being an amazing property manager or an amazing management company.
Okay. So I think really the first thing that comes to mind for me is communication and service. It's, collecting rent. And a lot of times owners will think, well, you just collect rent and send some people out to fix stuff. Well, there's so much more to it. There's a whole, one of the things that we do is we reinvest a lot of our revenue back into the efficiencies with our company that makes it easier to be a client, makes it more transparent, makes it easier for our people to do their jobs and feel successful at what they're doing. That's one of the key things, I think, is if we can have a team that feels successful every day, then they're going to be delivering great service to our clients, to our tenants, and to our vendors every day. And that's one of the goals I have as the executive vice president. So my husband, Tom, and I own and operate the business together. And he got the title of president, probably because of his skill set, but just because he's the president. So I'm the executive vice president of operations. And I really like the day-to-day, getting in and improving systems and processes and working with the people and the team, not just the clients and tenants and vendors, but our team as well. And so with that said, I think it's about what you have to provide as a service and what are the nuts and bolts behind that service. So, how easy are your statements read by your clients? How is the communication? So one of the key things that we find, or I've found over the years, is the communication between the tenant and our maintenance team is really key. If it's not an easy way to communicate, it makes it more difficult for us to do our job, and then we can't feel successful, and we can't do it as efficiently. So if we can create a way to communicate with the tenants more easily for them with the maintenance requests, then we've won that tenant over. And if their needs are being met in a way that fits with the landlord-tenant law, I'm not saying that we're going to give every tenant free. If they clog a drain and they've lived there for 2 years, we're not going to necessarily say, oh, don't worry about it, you don't have to pay. We enforce all of that. Yeah. But that whole communication thing, I think, is really key to providing great service. And this is the biggest asset, one of the biggest assets that most of our clients have. And if you're not treating it with kid gloves, if you will, and you're not knowing or remembering that this is their biggest asset and that transparency is really important. Now, that has to be balanced with the fact that only one person or one entity can manage a property. The owner can't manage it, and we can't manage it simultaneously. That won't work. Yeah. So we have to make sure that we have the controls in place so that we can be successful at it based on the landlord-tenant law and keep the owners out of trouble, keep the clients happy, or the tenants as happy as we can within the confines of the landlord-tenant law. So to answer your question, I think communication, transparency, and level of service.
Maybe we can talk about how NARPM helps members achieve these things that make for great companies. Yeah. And maybe really what I'm asking is, why should someone join NARPM? Okay. Like, obviously everyone wants to build a great company and succeed. So what does NARPM do to help?
So there's so many things that come to mind. So first of all, there's just the tangible education. So NARPM has 15 different courses that are available. Some are online, some are in person. I strongly recommend, if you can take them in person, do so. Sure. And they're competitively priced in the marketplace. What happens in the in-classroom courses and the courses that we've developed over the years, and I'm a certified NARPM instructor as well, is you get the interaction with the class. So not only are you getting the content that's in the class, in the curriculum, but you're getting all that conversation with your peers of what they're doing differently. And I challenge anyone who signs up for a NARPM designation class or 6-hour course, and some of them are CE approved as well, if people are licensed in their states. I challenge them not to find something that they can take away and turn into a profit area or more efficient area in their offices when they leave that course, that would pay for that cost of that course. And the other thing is the networking that we talked about, the conventions being really fun. A lot of what I learn at conventions is at the table at lunch. When you're sitting next to somebody, I'm in the Seattle area, I'm sitting next to somebody from Dallas, and I say, so what are you guys doing when this happens? How do you do a client onboarding? Hey, do you have a form for that? And then they would send it to me, right? And then I look at it and I say, I could probably implement this. Or I teach a class on taking the trouble out of refereeing the demands from clients, tenants, and vendors. And it has to do with communication and onboarding and expectations and all that. But just learning from one another is really what NARPM, to me, that's like one of the key things. The other thing is the legislative benefits. We have a pretty strong PAC, or we're getting there, a political action committee and a NARPM advocacy fund. So we have almost a full-time representative on the Hill. Tyler Craddock is our governmental affairs director, and he is representing the residential property management in our industry, hired by NARPM to be on the Hill and talking to legislators. So those are the two big things, is being heard on Capitol Hill about housing issues. Emotional service animals are one of the big ones now that we're working on and focusing on. But the education is the other thing. Now, if you don't have the opportunity to attend somewhere, we've got discussion groups, we've got Facebook pages, NARPM discussion group on a Facebook page, and that's another way just the cost of your membership, the registration fee for your membership, you could learn enough from the discussion group, which you can also, once you join, you ask to join the discussion group. You could learn enough in that discussion group in 1 year to pay for your membership, your registration, your annual registration.
Yeah. There are two things I want to kind of dig into, and I'm not sure what order is best, so I'll just go in the order that the questions popped up in my head.
Okay.
You were pretty like deliberate with saying that you were certified as an instructor. And I think I want to dig into that because I think a lot of people, like especially like on Facebook and stuff, if you're just scrolling through Facebook videos, will just kind of say whatever they want, like throw out advice, throw out ideas. You don't really know where it's coming from, what the source of like authority is. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what that certification looks like and how you actually pick instructors to lead these courses.
Sure. Well, first of all, there's two, just to back that up a little bit, there's two designations. Well, there's lots of designations, but two for property managers. One is an RMP, which is a residential management professional. And that's the first designation that someone can get. And it's a matter of attending events, earning points by writing articles or participating as a volunteer, or just different things to get your RMP. And there's an application, you fill that out. Then you have to have your RMP before you can apply for an MPM, which is a master property manager. And I have both of those designations. In order to be an instructor, you have to have both of those designations. So that's the first thing. And it involves taking those courses I just described as well, several of them throughout that time period of your application period. And then as far as a certified NARPM instructor is, you have to apply. You have to submit I think a 30-minute video. You have to, I applied about 5 years ago, so forgive me if I don't remember all the details, but it is a selective process where not everybody can just throw in their application. And we actually have a third party that does the evaluation of their application, so there's no favorites within the organization. So this third party will evaluate and give best feedback on what the impression was of them as an instructor on this 30-minute video that they submit, plus their application. So they do a scoring there. And then every year NARPM has a 2-day instructor training that we do back in Chesapeake at NARPM's headquarters in Virginia. And every instructor has to attend at least one of those every 2 years. So I've been to every one except for 2020. My travel schedule isn't going to permit me to attend, so I planned for that, and we'll miss 2020, and I'll be back in 2021. So,
well, if you've been to one every year, we'll forgive you for missing one. It sounds like it's a 2-year requirement anyway, but that's awesome, and that's pretty strict. So sounds like you have a really good vetting process. And then I want to touch on the second question I had, and I want to bring it back to something we were talking about before we even started recording. We had been talking about the emotional support animal screening and some of the work NARPM is doing with HUD requests to the FCC. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about what that is and how NARPM is getting involved.
Right. So over the years, probably in the last 5 or 6 years, NARPM has been kind of working our way into becoming, well, our vision is to become the recognized leader in the residential property management industry. So to that end, we've been knocking on doors. We do a day on the Hill, where it's now called our legislative conference, because it's so much more than just going to see legislators. We have speakers that come in and talk to us when we're not on the Hill at that event in DC. And we have sponsors for it. It's a 2-day event, and it works out really well as far as getting our name out there. And what we've been doing is trying to meet with key decision makers or key people that will kind of move our agenda, if you will, up to the ranks. And so this last year, and I'm going to just read the information because I don't want to get it wrong, that the Secretary Ben Carson has asked the Federal Trade Commission to investigate certain websites that may be selling assistant animal documentation. And that was the end result of us being multiple meetings over several years between NARPM and HUD. And the most recent was in late September, which included the NARPM Governmental Affairs Director, Tyler Craddock, who I mentioned earlier. And then John Bradford, who's the president of PetScreening.com, who has ad nauseum amount of data that's been collected, because that's what his company does, is for the rental industry, is screens pets. And their legal counsel, they have been meeting with and had a long-term meeting with the people in HUD to prompt this letter of investigation, or requesting this investigation from the FTC. So that's been huge for us on the legislative front, that we're being recognized, as our vision says we want to be, in this arena. And so we'll see where that goes. But yeah, it's been great for us to get to that point, and we hope to move that agenda even further.
I think the awesome part about that too is it just shows how savvy NARPM is, but also just how on top of like all the legal constraints there are, which are, you know, often one of the most difficult things to kind of navigate as a management company.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to dig in a little bit to that vision of being the recognized leader. We talked about how you have over 6,000 members now that are part of NARPM. How many chapters is that?
We have about 64 chapters throughout the country. Some of those are state chapters that don't necessarily meet, but they are formed for two reasons. One, to advance the state legislation and the state legislative issues. And then for number two, and when I say advance, I mean advance it in a way that favors property rights, and not just necessarily, you know, the landlord necessarily, of course, but property rights. And what we find in a lot of states and a lot of jurisdictions and municipalities, they're restricting those property rights. And that's where the state chapter comes in, is those numbers of people that are in the state will advance that legislative in our favor. And then number two is education. So for example, we have a state chapter in Utah, but we don't have a chapter in Utah. So it's a state chapter. I think that's correct. I hope I'm right. But there's some states that just have a state chapter and not a whole, they don't have smaller city chapters in their area.
Cool. And I think actually David had posted the link directly to find the chapter closest to you in the Ask a Question box. So for anyone on this live session, you can just click that link and find the closest one to you.
Sure.
Do you have a vision for how the number of chapters will expand, or is that going to stay like static?
You know, it's a constant debate, because what you need, NARPM is all volunteers. We're a volunteer organization. And that's where the members, the drive to increase the members is if we want more chapters. So if we want more chapters, some chapters are struggling now to get the volunteers. So why would we want to develop more chapters if we're having struggles with getting volunteers? Gotcha. We've created a way, and this is something the board has discussed and debated for years since I've been on the board, the last 6 years. And do we want to go to state chapters only? There's a lot of organizations not in the real estate industry that just have state chapters, and they don't meet on a regular basis. But one of the lifebloods of NARPM is meeting. So basically the drive to increase membership, part of that is if we want new chapters, then we have to have enough members. So because we have some chapters that are struggling with finding volunteers, you know, recycling leadership and so on, which I'm sure happens in a lot of organizations. So we are very intentional on how we are developing chapters.
Okay. Are there like a few, and I don't really know how this works strategically, so the question might not even make sense. Okay. But I'm kind of curious if there's a few states or local chapters that you're really focused on expanding, or if it's more of like building a national presence.
So a little bit of both in the strategy moving forward. We are looking at, there's some key areas. So for example, in Chicago, there's a lot of residential property managers in that area, in the Chicago area. And we used to have a chapter in Chicago, but it just wasn't thriving and it just kind of fell away. And so what we're doing now is we're doing networking groups and meetups, and the regional vice presidents, we have 6 regional vice presidents who are directors on the board. And as they see organic groups growing, then they are facilitating growth there and hopefully getting enough people on board and kind of interested and involved. And then once that happens, then they can become a chapter in formation, and they're kind of baby steps into becoming a chapter. So we're very intentional about it, rather than saying, oh, there's 3 people, you know, in Bismarck that want to get together and be an NARPM chapter. So we're more methodical on it now.
Awesome. I feel like I may have like left out an important question too, that I'm sure any listener that's not a part of NARPM is probably wondering, which is like, who's like kind of the ideal member for NARPM? Who should think about joining? Like, what does that look like?
So if you're, so I think there's chapter members or members of NARPM that may not even be in a chapter, maybe a member at large, but they still participate on the national level as far as national conferences, or they might go to a state conference. We have 6 state conferences around the country that are available for folks to go to if they don't have a chapter. And those happen annually. I think the ideal member is anyone that wants to learn and grow their property management career or business, or, you know, I don't know if you ever know everything you need to know about property management. There's always something new to learn. There's always somewhere to grow in the industry. So I know that sounds really broad-based, but, you know, whether you've been in the business for 20 years or 20 days, I think it's a valuable organization. I found it when I found NARPM. I was looking for something about how to do some particular situation with the tenant or something. And I noticed there were so many tenant groups and tenant advocacy groups that when I found NARPM, I thought, this is what I need. I need a resource for myself to learn how to do this job. And, you know, there's just so many ways to improve yourself and look at different ways of doing business that, and if you're managing rentals or even thinking about doing it, even if you're you know, you might be someone who's managing their own 8 or 10 rentals, you know, it might be something to look into just to learn.
Yeah, I think one of the things I love about NARPM is I feel like the ethos and the culture of NARPM is very much in alignment with Latchel's own principles.
Okay.
And one of the things we talk a lot about with our employees is continuous improvement, which is we need to always be looking at what's the better way to do something, what's the more efficient way, what's a better way to drive like maybe a profit stream. Like you had mentioned actually early in the conversation that you challenge anyone to go to like a NARPM conference or a luncheon or the forum or the classes, right? And not find some way to increase profit streams or increase their operating efficiency. And that focus on continuous improvement, I think, is actually essential to building a really successful and whatever your definition of success is, whether it's profitable or whether it's excellent service, you have to be willing to chase that continuous improvement and find the better ways to do things, because there's always going to be something you can get better at.
Right. And that's, you know, when I was, as the president of the organization, you get to pick a theme. And I was thinking about what my theme was, and being it's 2020, I wanted to do something that had, you know, this is a lifetime opportunity, 2020 and 2020 vision, and right, having to do with perfect or perfection or, you know, whatever. I came up with Elevate the Vision in 2020, or NARPM 2020, Elevate the Vision is how it goes. But
Nice.
So for me, it's about continuous improvement. How can we do it better? We need to think outside the box. And one of the other privileges as president is you get to assign a book to the board to read before our strategic planning. And I chose Brene Brown's Dare to Lead, which is all about, I don't know if you've read it. Some of the people really liked it. Some of the people it didn't resonate with, but I love it. And it's one of the things that is become, for me, a way I lead and a way I want to push my organization, T-Square, and the NARPM organization kind of out of its norm. And let's do something different. Let's be courageous and let's be brave and do something different. And how do we do it? And that's where the Dare to Lead came in for me, and where the Elevate the Vision. NARPM can't remain relevant and thriving if we don't continue to improve, because there's other groups out there that are holding conferences and doing things that if we don't get better and continuously improve, we're going to we're not going to thrive. We're not going to be able to survive.
Well, I think too, I want to dive a little bit into that book you mentioned, but from my perspective, from what I see, it is actually, it's not easy finding high quality groups to learn from.
Yeah.
And NARPM is, one of the few that are out there that is of extremely high quality. So I don't know if there's necessarily anyone like nipping at NARPM's heels. So that's kind of my point.
Well, yeah, I get what you're saying, but they certainly are offering maybe things that we may not have attempted to improve. It's been happening over the last 2 or 3 years. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we've decided to do, and I think this was through Steve Schultz's presidency, is we really need to up our game on our 2 flagship events. And one is our broker owner event, which is for brokers and owners of companies only, and only 2 people per company can come. So it's a very exclusive event. And this year it's in April at Turtle Bay in Hawaii, which is one of the premier resorts in the United States. And Damon Johns from Shark Tank is one of our featured keynotes. So, we're upping our game, and I'm excited about it, and we're stepping outside the box. And we got a lot of feedback, if you will, about how moving it from Vegas, this particular venue from Vegas to Hawaii. But we think it's the way we need to do it to up our game and to elevate our vision and elevate what we do and become recognizable and recognized. So
maybe it's a good time to segue back to the book you mentioned, because I want to make sure I got this right in case anyone wants to read it. Dare to Lead. Mm-hmm. And did you say the author was Brene Brown?
Right, I carry it with me a lot. Look, it's even got my sticky notes.
Brene Brown, okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Brene Brown. And really, it's a compilation of 4 different books of hers. Daring Greatly, I can't remember. Daring Greatly was one of them, and Rising Strong, and 2 others. And that's basically what it is.
Did you have if you had to summarize maybe a couple takeaways, even if it's just kind of bullet point format, mm-hmm. What were some of the takeaways you had from that book that inspired and impacted the way you built your company?
And I think it's about how I built my company, but it's also my character, that don't be afraid to be vulnerable when you're trying to lead a group. A lot of times, and this is her whole premise. I hate to speak for her because she's like a guru to me. But she maybe affirmed for me that it's okay to show vulnerability in the workplace when you're to remain courageous, because if you think about it, you can't have courage without vulnerability, because courage is being afraid and doing it anyway, right? So if you're going to try something new and push your organization in a way that maybe doesn't feel comfortable, you're being courageous, and therefore there's some vulnerability there. Or, and it's not like going into your team and saying, oh, I have really no idea what I'm doing. But it's maybe saying, this is new to me. Let's troubleshoot this together and see how we can work together as a team and figure out the next steps and the direction. And there's 2 different ways of saying the same thing. You don't have to let them know you don't know what you're doing, but maybe with their help, you can navigate it in the direction that you want to go.
I think
does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Because I think it also, when you take that approach, it gives you the space to do, for lack of a better term, it gives you the space to do bold things.
Exactly.
To try new things and do things differently.
Right. And try things that, one of the other things, and I know all these thoughts and concepts have been around for years from other authors and speakers and so on. But for me, she resonated with me a lot. You learn from your failures more than you learn from your successes, probably. And when you have those failures, then what do you do with them, and how do you learn from them? It's what you do with them that counts, right? So if you're not failing, then you're not trying, and you're not going outside the box, right, to try something different. And we do that a lot here, So.
And I think one of the beautiful things about NARPM is that you're in this space with experienced people that have failed a lot.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I mean that in a good way, that failing
in a
is
very
good
good way.
because it
And
gets
you
you to
know,
a
you were
point of,
saying about, yeah. You were saying about not knowing if you're working with people that really know the industry. What made me think, or what I thought of when you said that, is our discussion groups and the Facebook pages that are NARPM Facebook pages, and the conversations that are going on. They're really almost self-regulated in a way that if somebody says something off base, someone will say, well, where did you get that information? Because I understood it to be ABC. And then so there's thought going into it, and not just everybody subscribing to what one person says. So there's a lot of robust conversation in a respectful way that is happening for folks, as far as one of the benefits of being with NARPM.
So I'm not intentionally doing this to bring it back to Latchel, but again, this resonates with one of our principles. And by the way, the Latchel leadership principles, for the most part, we actually pulled from Amazon. I think I've mentioned this to you, but my co-founder Will started his, or not started, but most of his career was at Amazon. So when we started the company, we took those as our principles. But there's one called Disagree and Commit, which I think is along those lines, which is you have to really improve and build something successful. You have to have the space for people to disagree, share their different ideas, and then together commit to the thing that is going to work best, or that you think will work best. Then of course the follow-up is you actually have to measure that and does it actually work best, and if not, you pivot.
Well, Brene Brown talks about this here. She calls it the rumble. When you have those difficult conversations and you go in for the rumble, and she has these rules that she establishes with the team before they rumble, and difficult conversations, and the permission slips that you put together, little sticky notes of what you say. So there's a whole kind of process that she outlines of how to best do that with your organization. And it's really cool. Yeah.
Well, this book is now next up on my reading list, because that's one of the more challenging things, I think, at any company, is how do you can say, yeah, we want people to disagree and then we're going to commit to one thing, but how do you actually encourage that in like the most productive way without everyone just kind of like
storming off and
storming off or dogpiling on like the argument versus like the productive side of it.
Yes. And then what she talks about too is if it gets too heated and you get too emotional, that you get the permission to stand up or say time out. We need to regroup until I'm not as emotionally connected to this topic. And then it's kind of, like I said, it's not necessarily new information, but maybe it's just how she presented it that resonated with me.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and it all comes down to like, how do you build companies? And I feel like property management, it's two parts, and it's part of what makes it so hard. One part is being an expert in management, and the other part is you also have to be an expert in building a business.
Right.
So there's like two sides of that coin.
Building a business to me is all about the people that you work with. Really, it's I know that probably there's a lot of people that would disagree with me. Yeah, there's a bottom line, but that you won't be able to grow and succeed and be profitable if you don't have the right people and the people that want to be there in place.
Yeah. So I want to piggyback on that whole vision, the idea of elevating the vision.
Yeah.
What can folks expect from NARPM in 2020?
Oh, wow. Okay, good. I actually thought about that a little bit because you were kind enough to give me a couple of questions ahead of time. So thank you. So I talked about the broker owner in April. That's something that if someone fits that registration criteria, they should really think about attending. Like I said, too, there's 6 different state conferences. And I think that I hope that they'll see something different there a little bit. And then the annual convention will be in Amelia Island in Florida in October. I talked a little bit about the legislative arm of what we're doing. They can expect to see, I think, a little bit more publication or publicity or more exposure that they'll be seeing. We're sending out as often as we think relevant about what we're doing in DC. And then also as members of NARPM, we are encouraged to notify our governmental affairs committee about things that are going on in our areas, and they will assist in doing anything they can to help with even just writing position letters and so on for us. A couple things that came out of our strategic plan, not to get too into the weeds. We launched last year NARPM accounting standards. And that was a member benefit that we offered. And what it is basically a comprehensive set of GL codes for for companies' accounting options, right, as how they're bookkeeping. And that is a member benefit. So what we're doing this year is we're kind of taking that to the next level, and we're putting together a task force to identify some of the metrics that will be valuable to company owners and people that are involved with NARPM, like how many personnel per door do you have, or how many doors do you need per personnel, that kind of thing. What's the profit, or all these accounting metrics, if you will. But we're trying to determine which ones, through this task force, they'll be kind of brainstorming and think tanking. What are some of the metrics that will be valuable to members? Now that, because the NARPM accounting standards came out in 2019, 2020 will be a full year of comprehensive data. So while that data is being collected, we'll be looking at what metrics can be released in 2021 for the members to have as a value benefit to being in the organization. So we'll be looking at that. The other thing, we talked a little bit about leadership, and it's kind of one of my passions, is NARPM is a great organization, but it's not, and for me, it's a big part of my life, but it's not for everybody, a big part of their lives. But if we could offer, and this is something about elevating the organization, if we could offer some sort of leadership curriculum, if you will, or my vision is that we would have NARPM Leadership University at some point, similar to what, Disney has, or some of those big organizations, so that we set ourselves apart from just any other regular real estate organization. And I know that other organizations have it, but so that people could learn to be leaders, not just within their companies, but maybe if they decide that this career isn't for them, they've done something to take that with them in another career or in their personal lives or wherever, and it would be something of value that they could have. And so we have a task force that's being formed this year to kind of elevate that leadership thing. So like I said, one of our pain points is volunteers and ample numbers of volunteers. And we feel that if we can find a leadership track or just some sort of more robust leadership training, not just how to run a chapter, but what can you use outside of just NARPM, NARPM. So we're going to be doing that in 2020, and hopefully there'll be more on that in the next coming year or so. The education classes right now, in 2019, we had 81 classes that were held. And while that was down from 2018, we had more attendees in 2019. So we're looking at holding more classes, or at least offering it in different areas where more people could attend. So, and usually those are sponsored by the local chapters or the state chapter. And then lastly, one of the things that I get to do is pick a charity for 2020. So hopefully I can make a little plug for that. The charity I've selected is called the Alexander Hamilton Scholars, and they're based here in Seattle. And what they are, they're an organization that bridges the gap between high achieving youth and college entrance. So, and as they matriculate through college, the Alexander Hamilton Scholars keep these kids in the fold in their cohort throughout their whole career in college. And they have leadership development is really what they do. It's not a scholarship program. It's mostly how do you fill out grants? How do you fill out scholarship requests? How do you navigate your first year of college when you're a first generation college student because your parents are living paycheck to paycheck? The median income of an Alexander Hamilton Scholar family is $30,000, which is half of what the national average is. But these kids are Dean's List, community service, clubs within school, sports within school. They're just high achieving, really high achieving kids that don't have the opportunity necessarily or the know-how to get to college, and this Alexander Hamilton Scholars bridges that gap. So we're going to be working hard this year to raise money to continue that organization, as well as hopefully I'm hoping that some of the companies that are involved in NARPM will be able to offer internships to some of these students in between their school years, over the summer, because they really believe, the Alexander Hamilton Scholars Foundation or group believes that small business is the fabric of our economy. And if these college kids can get a taste of that, then they can see a little bit differently of what happens in the workforce and the business world too. So I'm really excited about it.
Well, I'll throw in Latchel's hat if they're looking for companies
to
support internships.
Actually,
please do. Okay. You have my email, so you know how to get in touch with me about that.
Great.
I love though that NARPM is volunteer based, but you still have the initiative to go work with a nonprofit fund like this, a charity organization, to still invest the time and resources to support them. That's really amazing. And I don't know why we haven't talked about this yet, because you mentioned it so many times now, but this is something I think listeners in NARPM and listeners not in NARPM yet should hear. How does someone volunteer if they want to help out and be a part of NARPM?
So great question. So you can volunteer at the local level in the chapter. We've got 5 national committees, and they usually trickle down in some way, shape, or form into the chapter levels. And that is communications, which handles all of the residential resource magazine, all of the website information, things like that. And then at the local level, we have a chapter website. At every chapter has their own website, and usually they have a Facebook page and invites to the chapter meetings and so on. And then we've got professional development committee nationally, and usually that's in the form of education at the local level. We've got member services, which is usually a membership chair at the local level. And then we've got governmental affairs, which is legislative. So governmental affairs nationally and legislative locally. And then the last one, we have a new technology committee here in 2019. So if somebody's interested in getting involved at that level, and the nice thing about getting involved at a committee, you get a really great inside view of what are the workings of that committee. Because really that's where all the work is done in moving this organization forward, is that a lot of people have a lot of great agendas, and our strategic plan comes out, and then it all goes to the committees, and then the committees do all the implementation of what was on the strategic plan, right? One of the other things, Ethan, I didn't mention, and I want to, is we are an organization of volunteers, but we have an amazing staff at Organizational Management Group, or OMG, with our CEO of Gail Phillips and Jackie Sabagal, who handles most everything NARPM if you have questions. info@narpm.org is where all those emails go. And we couldn't be the organization we are today if it weren't for that awesome staff. And they are not volunteers. So we are boots on the ground are the volunteers, but these guys are the ones that keeping us afloat as a business, if you will, as a 501c3. So
awesome.
Yeah, I just want to say we're not all volunteers in OMG, but right. Big part in our success.
That's good. So, let's give that shout out to Gail and Jackie. And if folks do want the whole team, I assume it's not just the two of them, right?
No,
the whole team. If someone wants to learn more about NARPM itself, or get in touch to see if they can be a part of a committee, should they be emailing info@narpm.org?
If they just have initial questions, I believe on the website, I'm pretty sure that you can join a committee. There's a link to join a committee, and you can fill out an application online to get involved. And communications, I know, is looking for people. All the committees are looking for folks that are, and it's not a huge time commitment, which is really nice. They meet about once a month on a conference call, and then there's work to do afterwards. But there's all kinds of other opportunities to get involved at the local level. So there's some of the state chapters are having state conferences, so you can be on the state conference committee. Or again, the local chapters are a great way to start. And again, if you're not in an area with a local chapter, then I would suggest the national committee would be a great place to go.
Awesome. And I don't want to leave you out, because I think a lot of folks might want to get in touch with you.
Sure.
So how should listeners get in touch with you if they
Well,
want?
for now, that would be president-elect or president-elect at narpm.org. Or I can give you my personal email, or my work email is my first initial K as in Kelly, and Tollefson is my last name, T as in Tom, OLLI, F as in Frank, SON, at tsquaremanagement.com.
Awesome. And so currently president-elect at NARPM.org. I assume, though, maybe Jan 1, that's going to go change to president at NARPM.org. All right, right on. And again, congratulations.
Thank you. I am really excited about it. We did, like I said, we just finished up leadership training. We've got a great group of volunteers for the year for 2020 and 2021. So it was all the presidents for 2020 that were there for chapters, and all the board of directors were there, and all the committee chairs, and then all the president-elects. So they'll be president in 2021. So a great group of folks. I'm really excited to be working with them, and I'm just excited to be here. I've worked hard to get here, and I'm excited that it's finally here. I know it'll go by really fast. So
it'll be blink of an eye, you'll be done, and then you'll have a second retrospective of 2020. In hindsight, how did 2020 go?
Yes.
But I think great things are around the corner. I mean, with everything we talked about just in this interview, it sounds like you're doing a lot. And if you can even get a fraction of all of this, even close to done in 2020, it would be amazing. So.
Well, and it's not me, it's the whole group around me that, they're doing all the work, but there's a lot on the agenda, definitely. And we just have a lot. Everybody's interested and looking forward to, like I said, moving the organization forward and keeping it relevant and thriving and even better. So I have a great group to work with, and it's going to be exciting to see what comes of it all.
Awesome. Kelly, thanks so much for joining this. It was a pleasure having you. I hope at some point we can do it again and maybe go even deeper on your own management company and how that journey has been.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure, Ethan. This has been great. I really appreciate the opportunity. It's been a privilege.
And I'll say for everyone listening, if you want to elevate the vision for your own company, go join NARPM. That's the best way to do it. I'm going to give a quick plug for a little lateral competition we're running. We are giving away a NARPM membership. So we'll actually pay for someone's dues if you join NARPM. The way to participate in that, just go to the Lateral Facebook page, and there's a post that explains how to join that competition. And fingers crossed, maybe you'll win. But whether you win or not, still a good idea to join. So make sure you're elevating your own company's vision in 2020. Join NARPM. I've gotten so much out of it, and I don't even run a property management company. Rachel does maintenance, so it's by all means worth it 150%. So definitely encourage everyone to go check out NARPM. Go to narpm.org or check out the Lateral Facebook page, and we're running that competition there. Again, Kelly, thank you so much. And for everyone else, like if you're interested in learning more about lateral services specifically, you can always head to lateral.com, click the book a demo button. Jen Sells, who usually would talk to you, is on vacation. So if you book that for any time in the next week, it's actually going to be me talking to you. So if you want to talk to me, go to lateral.com, click book a demo. Happy to talk to you. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. And again, Kelly, thanks so much.
Thank you, Ethan.
All right. You have a good one.
You too.